My name is Patrick Boyle. I'm the Executive Director of Ignite LI. We are the Manufacturing Trade Association for all products made here on Long Island. We run up to Albany, down to DC. We advocate and lobby for our member companies, which span 11 different sectors here on Long Island, from traditionally aerospace and defense to food manufacturing to the agriculture out on the East End, and pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, which have really had quite the boom these past couple of years. I'd like to start by just thanking our board members, Board President Ann Shabunko Moore, who is president at GSE Dynamics, Anthony Akumpora, partner at Silverman Akumpora, Emma Lee, president at ANZ Pharmaceutical, Phil Caniglio, director of the DeMattis School of Engineering at Hofstra University, Jordan Finkelstein, president of Exergy, Mitchell Reckler, president of Reckler Equity Partners, Michael Daddario, vice president of operations at Daddario and Company, and our newest board member, Dr. Hank Foley, president of New York Institute of Technology. So we're very grateful to have their support of industry and their leadership. I want to also thank our sponsors, Industrial Coverage Corporation of Patchogue, Burden LLC, Wells Fargo, Citron Cooperman, Denko Energy Management, Summit Safety and Security, and Dale Carnegie. So we wanted to talk about the impact of COVID and how famously supply chains have been altered negatively. The global pandemic taught us that the critical nature of imported products for everyday life, from semiconductors to toilet paper to personal protective equipment, global supply chains were tremendously impacted by COVID and, of course, the Suez Canal disaster, which further compounded this issue. Globalization has created an environment where imported products are critical to supply chains. And the pandemic showed us that sometimes these are weaknesses and there are opportunities where we find a little chaos, right? And we're going to hopefully show a little light on that today. Ignite LI has gathered a panel of industry experts to discuss some of these particulars and present their solutions for Long Island's manufacturing industries and small businesses. Specifically, I'll ask our panelists, what lessons did we take away from 2020 that we can employ to benefit our operations? Those could be positives and negatives. Are there opportunities in the wake of the global pandemic? What opportunities, what new regions are poking out as potential leaders? What does the second half of 2020 look like if we were to take out our crystal ball? And how can we anticipate these changes? Our panel represents Long Island's leaders in foreign trade, and we're obviously very honored to chat with them for a few minutes this morning. I'll ask that they take a few moments in the beginning after I introduce them to introduce themselves before they go off and start their presentation. Our viewers are invited to add their questions to the chat, and I'll read them as the presentation progresses. We're going to start this morning with Mr. Tom Cook, president of Blue Tiger International. I always like to start with Tom because Tom gives a really good 30,000-foot view of what's going on in the world. Tom, if you wanted to kick it off this morning.
Great. You talking about just introduction and all the presentation as well?
Well, if you could talk a little bit about yourself, let us know who you are, what you do, and a little bit about Blue Tiger, actually.
Great. So thank you, Patrick, for having me and my organization here. We appreciate the opportunity, and good morning to everybody who's listening in. Blue Tiger International goes back to 1981. We're based here on Long Island. We're a supply chain consulting company. We're also tied into the supply chain through relationship with a number of carriers, freight forwarders, and custom house brokers. And basically what we do is we help companies drive risk and spend out of the supply chain. Fortunately for me, in early in my career, I was in the Merchant Marine. I went to the Merchant Marine Academy, and was sailing on various vessels, moving cargoes from point A to point B, and also did some time in the United States Navy. And this is the greatest disruption that has occurred in global supply chain, actually going back all the way to the 1940s, when World War II was out there, and you had German submarines in the Atlantic Ocean and Japanese submarines in the Pacific Ocean, disrupting the movement of ocean freight all over the world. So this disruption that I'll talk about when I give the presentation really has had a significant impact on global supply chains worldwide, and more particularly to companies based here on Long Island.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. And if you wanted to, I guess just jump right into your presentation.
Great. Okay, let me get it up. Okay. So again, a big thanks to Patrick in setting up this event. Appreciate the fact that information is gold. And when an organization like Ignite puts this information out here that we're going to all be talking about this morning, it's of real value to the membership and so forth. And Patrick and his organization is working real hard with manufacturers and distributors at bringing a number of resources to them, and companies like the ones on this panel to give advice and counsel to them so that they can deal with a lot of the challenges that they have in their supply chains.
Thank you, Tom.
So the current disruption in global supply chain can be categorized in specifically three areas. The first is the delays that are occurring, the costs that are involved, and the uncertainty, particularly as it relates to trying to plan out your business model over the next 3 months, 6 months, and even the next year or so. The delays can last as much as 6 to 9 months in actually moving goods internationally. The costs have skyrocketed. I'll give you an example. In 2019, the average cost of a 40-foot container coming from Asia into the United States was around $2,400. Today, those costs are passing $15,000 for a 40-foot container. And about a week and a half ago, we wrote one that was over $20,000 for a 40-foot container coming in from Asia. So those costs are just absolutely outrageous and never seen before in the industry. And the more concerning issue is the uncertainty that has occurred, because this cost escalation, this delay escalation, started in February of last year and has continued to get worse and increase every month, considering all the way to this time frame. And I'll mention a little bit later, for planning purposes, our anticipation is that this uncertainty and the circumstance that we're dealing with will probably last into the second quarter of next year. So part of this conversation is to provide some information to you to rethink how global supply chains are structured, develop additional resources that you can depend upon for information flow. Information is gold. You know, making decisions is better to make better informed decisions, and some of the aggressive actions that you could take in your supply chain to mitigate some of the issues that we're facing. So every one of us has responsibility, whether we're importing or exporting, and even our domestic distribution, to try to lower the landed cost. And the landed cost meaning the total cost of moving the goods from its origin point to where it becomes point of value to us, which is typically to our customer. This is made up as many as 15, 16 different areas, but the primary areas are the acquisition costs that we pay for goods, the freight charges that are involved in moving the goods from point A to point B. If the goods are crossing a border point, we have customs clearance charges, duties and taxes, which are significantly high. They used to average around 4.5 to 5.5%, but particularly on goods coming out of Asia and particularly China, we've seen escalations with the 301 tariffs to as much as 25 to 30%. And then we have the costs involved in warehousing and distribution to bring the goods in that last mile delivery process. So what I want to share with you is some of the ideas that you can think about relative to how do we deal to mitigate all these issues that we're facing. The first is alternative sourcing. One of the things that I think Patrick is very full aware of in his outreach to many of the manufacturers and distributors on Long Island, is that a lot more companies are near sourcing. But I can tell you for sure, a lot more companies are moving a lot of their purchasing and sourcing out from China to countries like Vietnam, to countries like Malaysia, Taiwan. We're moving a significant amount of companies down to Mexico into the Maquiladora program, which provides huge advantages from a financial perspective and a logistics perspective as a source for U.S. products, as well as companies bringing the manufacturing right back here to the United States. We recommend that you control the freight purchase. We deal with a lot of companies that buy on a basis of Ex Works and FOB. It's good because you're controlling the cost of the freight from the early stages, but buying on a CIF or a DDT basis, you're leaving the freight up to your supplier, and that generally has negative consequences, particularly in the environment that we're dealing with currently. Many companies use several freight forwarders, custom house brokers, steamship lines, airlines, and trucking companies. Freight consolidation is a very good way of leveraging your spend with a number of companies, maybe one or two. Concluding with decisions involved and assessments involved in your robust supply chain studies. Really picking it apart and analyzing each of the areas where there's cost and risk, and seeing where potential change could be integrated to have benefit. Additionally is the demand planning process. We used to be able to run demand planning systems in the area of 60, 90, 120 days out. The current disruption in the supply chain is moving that time frame to as much as 6 to 9 months and as much as a year out in terms of making sure that we get the goods that we ordered on a timely basis. On the export side, where we're selling goods overseas, the reverse of that is happening, meaning that we're having our buyers overseas order things at a much earlier date and a much higher volume to maintain and keep up their inventory balances. Additional things that can be done relate to foreign trade zones. We have Brad Hemingway, who's a specialist in this area. But foreign trade zones provide tremendous economic advantage to companies that are involved in importing and exporting. We now are doing between 3 and 5 new foreign trade zones somewhere in the United States and here on Long Island for companies that find value in that program. Bonded warehouses is similar to foreign trade zones, as another opportunity where companies can lower their landed costs. Tariff engineering is re-engineering the product so that you can get a change in the harmonized tariff number and therefore a lower duty rate. Drawback is a program with customs that if you import something, you pay duties and taxes, and now those goods get exported. There's an ability to request up to 99% refund of the duties and taxes paid. And you don't necessarily have to be the importer, and you don't necessarily have to be the exporter. You just have to be able to evidence that the goods were imported and exported. And then looking at domestic distribution, and particularly where you locate warehouses. We just helped a company here on Long Island put an additional warehouse out on the West Coast because their distribution to their client base, the demographics of that was spread out through the United States. So they were able to create a lower cost where instead of bringing the containers only into the East Coast, they're now bringing containers in from overseas to the West Coast and doing distribution up from Reno, Nevada. So this is something that should also be looked at. When we talk about resources, you have a great panel here that is available to you to be a tremendous resource. You have Maricel, who's going to talk about the Department of Commerce. We happen to be a trading partner with the Department of Commerce. They're a tremendous resource because they have a huge footprint in Washington. They have a huge footprint all over the world where they have various offices that represent the U.S. Exporters, and they can help you dramatically in the building of your global supply chain. You have Ignite itself. Patrick has done a great job of bringing a number of resources available to the members. The Long Island Trade Association, which is a new group under the National Institute for World Trade, which is bringing a whole subjective series of education and training to companies involved in importing and exporting. You have the New York District Export Council, which is a group of volunteers, all appointed by the Secretary of Commerce, that are all available to help companies in the metropolitan area. And you have my company, Blue Tiger International. We've made arrangements with Patrick. Anybody attending these type of events, you're welcome to a free 2-hour consultation. Anything that we can do to help you reduce risk and spend in your supply chain and help you think out how you manage the disruption, we'd be more than happy to provide assistance. So just some additional things that I wanted to mention in relevance to the supply chain is China as a supplier and a customer, that's in jeopardy because of the whole sensibilities of how companies feel about China as a dependent source for US products and services, and also as a customer as well. Keep in mind that when the 301 tariffs were implemented by President Trump in his first months of office, President Biden has now continued those 301 tariffs, and the statements coming out of the Department of Commerce is those tariffs are likely to stay through the end of 2022. Okay, so China has retaliated and put tariffs on many products coming from the United States into China. We still have a significant amount of problems directly with China: trade compliance, forced labor, intellectual property rights, and forced technology transfers, which make significant vulnerabilities and increased risks in doing business with China, both as a supplier and also as a customer. And for those who are planning out how your logistics and supply chain is going to work, the information that we have derived from a number of manufacturing sources that we feed into is that the freight disruption is likely to continue to the second quarter of 2022. So continuation of costs and delays will be in place. So you need to really think out your demand planning process for those that are importing, for your purchasing, and for those that are selling goods overseas for your sales planning. And keep in mind that there's generally not one solution that's just available to you. That a lot of times it's peeling back the onion and taking multiple solutions to really get the best impact in your supply chain. So with that, I'll close my comments and hand it off to my fellow panelists. And keep in mind that at any point through the presentation or after, you're welcome to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help. Our contact information is on this last slide, and Patrick's going to make these slides all available to the people who attended. So with that, Patrick, I'll hand it back to you.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Thanks very much. And thanks for being such a great partner of Ignite, and your offer to all the folks that are here on this call today and all the Ignite members. I think what you had to say about this, the second quarter of 2022 and the impact of supply chain challenges happening right now, that's pretty pretty telling of the times that we're in right now. I'm very thankful that you actually addressed China. I'm sure that's on a lot of people's minds, and of course alternative sourcing. So I want to also thank you for you plugged Maricel pretty nicely. So we're going to jump over to Maricel, and I know that you guys have been working very, very well together. So Maricel, I'll let you talk a little bit about who you are and what the U.S. Commercial Service does. If you could talk a little bit about your partnership with Tom, actually, that would be really nice as well. And then you can jump into your presentation.
Sure. Thank you. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Confirm? Great. So yes, I'm Maricel Tres Palacios. I'm the director of the U.S. Commercial Service office on Long Island. We are part of the Department of Commerce, as Tom mentioned. So we're a federal agency whose main mission is to help American companies export their goods and services. We are part, within the Department of Commerce, we're part of the International Trade Administration, ITA, as we call it. It has experts of industries. They also have a unit that works with countervailing duties and enforcement of our free trade agreements and things like that. And within ITA and with the U.S. Commercial Service, we're basically the export promotion arm of the United States government. And we partner with with many organizations and entities in the United States, including, of course, organizations as TOMS, the National Institute for World Trade. We partnered together to carry out many educational webinars and seminars in person, online. We've done that for years now. I've been on Long Island, I believe, for 4.5 years, and I know that the relationship of the U.S. Commercial Service Long Island with Tom and his team precedes me by quite a few years. So let's see, how exactly does the U.S. Commercial Service assist American companies? First of all, we do that through a pretty extensive network of domestic trade specialists in the United States. We have offices in over 100 U.S. cities, and Long Island is one of those places where we have an office. We cover Nassau and Suffolk counties. So if any of the companies that are listening to us today are not based on Long Island, please do feel free to contact, and I'll offer the link on the next slide, your local trade specialist office. I believe it's very important to at least establish that relationship and know where your next commercial service office is, because you never know what having that contact can help you with in a given chance. And then internationally, we are in over 75 countries. We work through our U.S. embassies and consulates overseas. And in those places where we do not have a physical presence, such as Bolivia, a few of the Central Asian countries, quite a few in Africa, we tend to operate through our U.S. Department of State colleague, with our colleagues at the State Department. We are, as I have it down here, the only federal agency with an integrated U.S. and overseas field organization that has experts in industries and that are market experts. So please do take advantage of us. Long Island specifically, it's a two-person office, as I mentioned, I'm the director. We cover a wide range of industries. And this is something I want to emphasize when we mention exports. People usually think the big container full of physical goods, but exports also include services. And that can go from travel and tourism to education, to health services, to media and entertainment, financial services, design and construction, engineering, that sort of thing. One thing that I will mention is that we, as a federal agency, we do have a requirement to work with US-based companies that have at least 51% US content in the goods and services that they offer. My office, as I mentioned, we work in Nassau and Suffolk. We're located in the New York Institute of Technology in Old Westbury. Many of our services are free of charge, and some of them do have modest fees. I'll mention them throughout my presentation. And that's the link where you can find your nearest commercial service office. These are some of the areas that we tend to assist companies with: export counseling, so quite trying to help you with a sales strategy, a market entry strategy, understanding export documentation requirements and regulations overseas, navigating export controls, compliance, trade finance. Another thing that I'll mention is that, of course, I'm not the expert in all of these areas, but we do rely on the extensive ecosystem of trade, and that includes co-counseling with people like Tom Cook, or co-counseling with our export-import bank partners, the SBA, the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is in charge of some of the export compliance. Market intelligence, the U.S. Census Department, which also falls under the Commerce Department, is the largest repository of data in the world. They gather much data, and we take most of it and try to generate reports that are useful to U.S. exporters. We can conduct background checks on potential buyers overseas. We can help you identify best prospects, understanding financial laws in a specific country, understanding recently enabled laws in those countries if they are export related. And then there's the area of business matchmaking. This is where most of our fee-based services are found. But basically, if you're looking for a new distributor, if you're looking for a new sales partner, a sales representative, a joint venturer, we can assist with identifying those potential partners for you. And then there is commercial diplomacy. So if a company is continuously facing some sort of export barrier into a specific market or region, please do feel free to come to us and let us know. These things do take time, but you are our eyes and ears, the exporting community, and we here as government would very much appreciate it if you would let us know any of those issues. Next, on commercial diplomacy, I also want to highlight that we assist free of charge companies that are bidding on foreign procurement projects. So for example, if you're a company and you are applying for a bid, a public bid to supply a foreign, to supply desks to a public school in Trinidad and Tobago, you can come to us and we can advocate on your behalf for that specific bid. And I mentioned that example because it did happen. On export canceling, these are some of the common questions that we can get. How can I be sure Brazil will accept the testing that has been done on my product? How can I protect my intellectual property? I'll mention that we have IP attaches in selected regions of the world. Does my product qualify for preferential tariff treatment under a specific FTA? Can you help me find an in-country attorney to review my contract? And I'll stress this out to our commercial specialists overseas. They keep lists of service providers in those specific countries. So if you're looking for a translator in Japan, if you're looking for an accountant to help you opening your office in Vietnam, please reach out. Chances are that we might have a good list of vetted candidates that you can look to. Can I export to Cuba, Syria, Sudan, Somalia? So some of the common questions that we get, and here are some of the ones that my office specifically has received literally within the past 2 weeks. Where can I find my HS code number? Pretty simple question, but we get inundated with those. The certificates of origin for cosmetic products going into China need to be notarized in the United States. So you can see that some of the questions can get very specific, but relatively easy to answer. In this case, I reached out to our commercial specialist office in China, which, by the way, we have 6 different commercial offices, consulates, and embassies included in China. How can I get a certificate of conformity in order to comply with Saudi Arabia's importing requirements? For this question, I didn't even have to reach out to our commercial specialist. I just went to our online country commercial guide for Saudi Arabia, and I found the answer right there. These country commercial guides are free to use, and they're all available on trade.gov. Do customs in Japan require an importer to release their chemical abstract services number? So I know that the questions can get very specific, but once again, we do have a pretty good teams on the grounds in different countries around the world that can help with these questions. Let's see. Now, I guess I'll dive just a little bit momentarily into some export statistics, just to put things into context. Some of these statistics are from 2021, so quite updated. Some of them are pre-COVID. I apologize for that, but I thought that I mentioned them briefly nonetheless. Here are the amount of jobs supported by U.S. exports of goods and services. We can see that California and Texas are pretty big states, big exporters. New York is up there. Here to my right are estimates of jobs supported by U.S. exports of goods. Sorry, let me move here because I cannot see. There you go. Estimates of jobs supported by U.S. exports of goods and services broken down by destination. Not surprisingly, of course, that our NAFTA, now USMCA partners, Canada, Mexico, are a big chunk of those jobs that are generated by exports. And then there is China, Japan, Korea in there. And from Europe, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and a few of those. For New York specifically, these are the export partners and the import partners. From this list, we see that Switzerland figures on both sides. Pretty interesting, I guess. I would dare to guess that most of it has to do with financial services, which we export quite a bit because of New York City. There is Canada, the UK on the export side, and on the import side, we're importing quite a bit from China as a state, and from India. Now, what exactly are we exporting and importing? I know that these can be a little general, but gathering statistics that are more specific, it's pretty hard. On the export side, New York State as a whole is exporting a lot of miscellaneous manufacturers, primary metal manufacturers, computer and electronic products, used or secondhand merchandise, and chemicals. And on the import side, quite a bit of overlap in there, but there's also apparel and accessories, chemicals, computers, things like that. Now, the New York Metropolitan export statistics. These include a little bit of Newark, Jersey City, Long Island, of course, New York City. But in here, we see that from the whole state, the New York, Newark, Jersey City exports the most by far in comparison to the other regions of New York State. Our metropolitan region is the second largest in the US. I believe number one is the Houston metropolitan area, and third is Los Angeles. But these three areas are constantly disputing first, second, and third place. Last year, in 2019, we were the second. And here are some of the goods that we've been exporting, and also the selected markets that we're exporting to. So APEC, it's pretty big. That includes China, of course, Chile, quite a few of the Pacific Rim countries. NAFTA, not surprisingly, and the EU. Now, just going a little bit here, more micro, Nassau and Suffolk counties highlighted here in red. These are their exports from 2012 to 2019. We see, interestingly, that Suffolk tends to remain quite stable with $3.7 billion in exports in 2012 to 3.8, 3.3, 3.6, 3.7, and now 4.2. Nassau, on the other hand, tends to fluctuate based on these statistics a little bit, $4.9 billion in exports, 6.5, and currently we are $3.4 billion in exports. I wanted to highlight, because I know that Ignite Long Island works much with manufacturing companies, and I wanted to highlight this recently launched industry tracker for manufacturers. It's nationwide, so not specific to New York, let alone Long Island. But for people that are doing this type of research and that are into statistics, it can be a pretty interesting tool to use. You can see in there to the right, the different areas of manufacturing that are being covered. So food, beverage, textiles, apparel, paper, chemicals, plastics, computer peripherals, furniture. So quite a few bit of areas there involving manufacturing, and the data can be downloadable. I wanted to highlight other free tools for US exporters. I already mentioned the country commercial guides. Again, this can be found on trade.gov. Pretty easy to use, and they cover from best prospects, industry prospects. For example, you can go to the Morocco commercial guide and see what are the industries and sectors where US companies are doing relatively well in this market. And it can come up to aerospace, safety and security, ICT, healthcare. You can see, click on those and see statistics and things that justify why those industries, US companies in those industries are doing well in that market. I encourage people, companies to please do check our FTAs. We have FTAs not only with Mexico and Canada, but also as we have here with Jordan, Bahrain, Australia, the Dominican Republic, quite a few in the Americas as well. We have a market diversification tool, free to use. Again, the only thing you need to know is your harmonized system code, your HS code. You plug it in and it will give you potential markets that you can export to based on different indicators, such as English speaking, whether or not they're landlocked, whether or not they have they rank high on the ease of doing business of the World Bank. So different indicators that you can assign weights to depending on what's important to you. And it will give you a list of countries that you may have potential exporting into. The Census Department has the Global Market Finder tool. I really like this tool because they give you the price unit for which that item has been sold. So for example, pianos that are being exported into Chile. What is the price unit for those pianos that are being sold there? And you can see how you figure or how your product prices against those. We have a few market destination videos. On the industry side, we produce market reports that are industry based. We have newsletters that are industry specific. We have an advanced manufacturing industry team that's pretty good. So if you're interested in any of those, these are all hyperlinked, and I'll share this presentation so you can have access to it. Just another other tools here, trade finance guide. I really like this guide. It's very short. It's available in English and Spanish. It's very short, and it gives you a very good, concise summary of trade finance and the different aspects of it. I always, as a government agency, I guess, I always like highlighting the importance of export compliance. There are many different aspects to export compliance, including where you're exporting to, what you're exporting, the end use of that item, but also who you are exporting to, right? For individuals, you can go into the consolidated screening list and make sure that they are not, for lack of a better word, blacklisted by the US government. So if you're working with a new distributor or a new sales rep, make sure you run them through this list. Intellectual property, we have stopfakes.gov. And they have quite a few good reports there. Make sure that you, regardless of the product that you offer, this doesn't only pertain a manuscript for music, for example, or for entertainment. Intellectual property is everything. And some companies have been surprised to find out that they went into a market and they didn't quite do their research, their homework regarding intellectual property, and they lost ground because in that market they thought that their product was not, no one could copy their product, and turns out that they were able to, and they just copied their products and lost quite some business there. So make sure you pay attention to this. It's stopfakes.gov. They have country reports, and they have also industry-based reports for intellectual property. Now, I know that I mentioned a little bit of this at the beginning, but let's suppose that now you've done all of that research, you've gone into our market diversification tool, you've checked our stopfakes.gov intellectual property reports, you've done your due diligence, but now you need that additional help actually finding those deals, finding those partners overseas. This is when we can really come in and assist you. As I've mentioned, our main service is the gold key. This is when we vet candidates for you. We introduce them to you. And in normal world before COVID, or people at the embassies and consulates could attend those meetings with you in person. Many companies like that, having that US presence at those meetings to add legitimacy to those encounters. As I mentioned, we can do background checks. We can promote your company in country through the US Embassy or the ambassador's residence, whatever it is. Companies use this service, for example, to train. If they have to engage in this big training for the product they're launching in that market, and they need space, and the people that take care of the logistics of organizing the event, we can assist. If a company is launching a new product and they want to do a reception, a welcoming reception into that market, we can help. I'll mention the gold key for a small size company is $950. We can do the same thing virtually without having to be, if you're not in a position to travel, as many of us are right now, we can do the introductions virtually, and that will be, I think, $900, something like that. These are some of the upcoming events that the commercial service around the United States is organizing: digital business solutions for exporting, coffee, advanced manufacturing coffee with India, USMCA related events, South America, if that's a region you're targeting. We have the remaining sessions are Chile and Guyana. Some of these are free, some of them are $25, $35. And security technology virtual pitch. This is more of a targeted event, but it's for safety and security, and it's targeting Colombia, I believe. somewhere in South America. And this other event here to your right that pertains to environmental technologies. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Happy to answer any questions at the end of the event. Thank you, Patrick.
Wonderful. And Maricel, as with all things, thank you very much for your partnership and everything that you provide for Long Island's manufacturers and small businesses. Every time I sit here and I listen to you talk about the services that the U.S. Commercial Service provides, I'm usually awestruck by the vast diversity of products that you guys offer and the things that you can handle from your office. It's very impressive. It's really a wonderful tool, especially for a place like Long Island that is exporting a tremendous amount of products and importing a tremendous amount of products. I am glad that you mentioned the USMCA. I was down in DC about 2 years ago before COVID, advocating for the USMCA, and I learned that about 51% of products made here in New York are traded with our partners to the south and to the north, so with Mexico and with Canada. And I thought that was a really good segue into our friend John Costanzo, who not only represents LDK Logistics, but also Maple, which is a wonderful organization that works to build the relationship between Canada and I think the United States, but specifically for John, Long Island. Is that right, John? Oh, John, you're muted.
Yes, sorry
There
about
you
that.
are.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's right. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, so what I do in life is our company is a logistics agency representing or giving access to companies that move freight and parcels throughout North America. The company is LDK Logistics, as Patrick said. I spent, it's interesting when Tom was talking about his view of the market today, the supply chain. I said the same exact thing, Tom, that you just said earlier to a reporter earlier this week in Newsday. Who's, by the way, for everyone on the call, she's publishing an article Monday on the supply chain in Newsday, the 19th. So you may want to take a look at that. I haven't read it yet. I don't know what she's going to say, but it's on the very topic we're speaking about. And she asked me the same question, how do you look at this market? And I said the same exact thing you said, Tom. I said, I've been thinking about what, in the decades I've spent in logistics, transportation, what period would I relate closest to this market? And the only one I can think of was World War II. I called it World War 2.0. It's and I use the same analogy. It's amazing. You were in a merchant marine, so that was the main means of trade,
right,
and moving goods internationally back then. And those ships were being attacked by our enemies and shut down trade for quite a while. So this is a pretty tough market. My background is in logistics, transportation. I was president before I formed this company a couple of years ago of a company called Purolator, which handled international trade with Canada or cross-border trade with Canada. I've been head of a company called TNT, which was a parcel logistics international company. I worked for a KLM subsidiary that I led here in the States. So I've spent my whole career since leaving the service many decades ago in logistics. I also am on the Regional Economic Development Council with Brad and with Maricel, the Manufacturing Committee, which I co-chair, and I head up the International Committee for the LIA, Long Island Association. So I'm very invested in this whole idea of supply chain, international trade, and I know that this is all going to pass eventually, but for now, we're going to have to deal with it as best we can. So what I'm going to focus in on is something that Patrick mentioned earlier. Where are the opportunities short term, right, as we deal with all of this? And I'm going to focus a little closer to home, and that is, as Patrick said, in Canada and Mexico. Global trade could be very complex. Maricel is an expert, and congratulations, Maricel, on your recent promotion, well-deserved promotion to director. She's an expert in navigating all that complexity globally, as well as in Canada and Mexico. So I would like to focus a little bit more on that opportunity closer to home. So let me try to share this, if I could figure out how to do that. One sec. Okay, that should be on your screen. Can you see that?
Yep. Got it,
Okay,
John.
let me try to open that up. Okay. So I want to focus, if I can, on the importance of cross-border trade. Cross-border meaning between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. First, the trade value today amongst the United States, Canada, and Mexico is $600 billion, or higher now, actually, since this study for this data was collected. And if you think about trade, everybody looks at the most significant relationship we have, or thinks the most significant relationship we have, is with China. But the trade between Canada, Mexico, and the United States dwarfs our exports to China, right? It's a one-way relationship with China and some other parts of Asia. But between Canada and Mexico, it's our largest, over $600 billion traded annually. And it's for good reason. The economic, the regulatory, transportation infrastructure, they're all closely harmonized. When I was president of Purolator, I used to go down to Washington to meet with the ambassador from the US. And I never had to sell the concept of keeping an open, free border, because he and his staff were vigilant about that and working closely with their colleagues in Washington to make sure the infrastructure and the border kept a free and flow of trade between our countries. And the same was true for Mexico. So there's a huge amount of opportunity already, and it already exists, right? That infrastructure is there. They work hard, all three countries, to harmonize those regulatory regimes that enable us to move product back and forth among our countries. So it's an easier market for most companies to enter. You know, some companies on Long Island, I think 90% of the companies here on Long Island employ less than 20 people. A little bit of a cook, chef, and bottle washer problem, right? Trying to do everything, including thinking about where do I expand next? And if I always encourage our clients that when you're thinking about exporting to another market, to look north and maybe south, right? It's closer. Again, the economic, the regulatory, the USMCA, as Patrick alluded to, has given many, many benefits to trade here regionally. And it's something that I think companies are already benefiting from. And if you're thinking about entering an international market, I would look north and south first. And New York is already heavily invested as well. There's already almost $20 billion in trade or exports. About 24%, in fact, of New York exports end up either in Canada and even Mexico. And Mexico is growing, right? There's a significant middle class in Mexico, and they're buying American goods, especially through e-commerce and other opportunities. So the export volume to Mexico is fairly significant. Again, 24% to both countries of all New York exports. In addition, the reverse is true. We import about $20 billion of goods from both those countries, which is equivalent, or was equivalent in 2019, to what we imported in New York from China. So the relationship between, or amongst, the NAFTA, what used to be called NAFTA countries, now USMCA agreement countries, is two-way. And it's as significant for New York on exports as it is imports. It's the largest trading bloc in the world, I believe, still, because of that. And if you're thinking about exporting internationally, I would encourage you to think north and south for that reason. Long Island, as Maricel pointed out to us, is a very strong export market. Nassau County, in both goods and services, exported, when this study was done, about $6 billion worth of goods and services. And Suffolk County was a little heavier on the goods side, but exported $9 billion. So in total, Long Island companies are exporting $15 billion worth of goods and services around the world. It's a bit of good news and bad news. I worked with Hofstra University at the fall of last year to poll or survey manufacturing executives. They did a great survey. If you haven't seen that, I'd be happy to get you a copy of that survey. But they surveyed executives leading the supply chain of Long Island companies as to how they see the market, right? Not only their production in the future, their inventory holdings, their new order sales, but exports. You know, did they see exports as an opportunity, and how did that look in the future? Well, what we learned is that 50% of the respondents are exporting. And that's the good news. The bad news is 50% of the respondents aren't exporting yet. And some of the reasons were they thought of the complexity of getting into the international market was a little bit too challenging, again, because most companies on Long Island employ less than 20 people. It's a little challenging to do that. We need good people like Tom and Maricel and others. Our company can help to help, navigate those complexities. But that's a challenge, but also a great opportunity, I think, for Long Island companies to expand, and particularly into the Canadian and Mexican markets. And jobs here are already highly dependent on the export market. 100,000 jobs, again, this is both goods and services exports. 100,000 jobs are directly related to goods and services exports here on Long Island today. And those are typically higher paying jobs, right? What we're exporting is electronics, aerospace products, right? We're manufacturing high-end IT services, consulting service, some of the higher end trade services, accounting, legal, logistics, right? These are typically higher paid services. The companies that I led here on Long Island employed 300-400 people, and they were very high paying roles. Mostly they were IT people, marketing people, supporting people that are exporting and importing around the world. So these are great jobs. If you add the jobs that are not directly related to import-export, in other words, supporting companies exporting and importing, it's over 150,000, 160,000 jobs. So it's already an important area for us. I would strongly encourage anybody thinking about getting into exporting to look north, look south. It's not simple, but there's plenty of support. Maricel and her team can help open up markets for you, help you present your product, make connections for you. Companies like Tom's and mine can help with the logistics, the supply chain, returns management, customs brokerage, whatever you need. And again, Canada and Mexico are already heavily invested in this relationship, and the regime and the regulations are less complex and easier to navigate. And I would encourage that focus in those markets. And if we could be of any help, you can reach out to me anytime. Happy to provide any advice I can on that. And that's it for me today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, John. And I just wanted to, with all things import, export, John, you're really a very great partner of Ignite, and you're doing a really wonderful job of leading the RADC manufacturing committee. So thank you very much for your leadership. Thanks for being here today. If you can, just stop sharing your screen, and then we're going to jump over to Brad. And I think something that John said a couple minutes, actually might have been Maricel said a couple minutes ago, that the amount of imported products is pretty much equivalent to the amount of exported products, which I think is interesting for Brad. Because with the foreign trade zones, they work in getting companies to bring in products. They then send them back out, right? I'll let Brad talk a little bit further about that. But Brad, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for your partnership. Thanks for being a great friend all these years. So
absolutely, Patrick.
And I apologize that I was the reason that your son is on the train to Chaminade this morning.
That's right. He made it okay. I've been watching him on Life 360, so I know he made it.
It's character building. It's character building. For too many years, I took the S40 from East Islip to St. John the Baptist. So he's going to be he'll be a better man for it. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Brad. Thanks for being here. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. Always a pleasure. Anytime you ask me to speak, I jump at the opportunity, especially when I saw the panelists that were coming on this morning. An honor to be in your company, and I've got history with each of you, so it's good to see all of you. And back to your first comment earlier, Patrick, let's really hope this is getting close to the end of our Zoom calls, and we see everybody here, both panelists and participants, very soon. So, but with that, like I said, anytime you ask me to come on, I jump at the opportunity, because it's my job to let people know that foreign trade zone exists here on Long Island. And that's a function of the relationship that the town of Islip has had with Suffolk County. It's Suffolk County that brought this program here to Long Island. They are the grantee on the program, and we are what's called a magnet site here. We are that physical location for people in the import-export community that are looking to take advantage of the foreign trade zone. I say that because it's very important to know that we're set up here as that magnet site, as a physical location where we're kind of a plug-and-play arrangement for those that want to take advantage of those foreign trade zone benefits. Above and beyond that, I saw Lisa Broughton, I think she was on the call earlier. Lisa Broughton's over at Suffolk County. This wonderful opportunity is available to anybody that's doing business here in Suffolk County, any importer or exporter. Now it's working with people like myself, with Tom Cook, with Lisa, with John, even Maricel to better understand whether or not these foreign trade zone benefits actually have applications for your business. So as a quick primer, what I wanted to do this morning was kind of, as I always do, run through very quickly what some of those benefits are. The biggest benefit coming out of a foreign trade zone is the tariff treatment, something that Tom was talking about quite a bit. And as we're seeing the competitive landscape change and the supply chain constraints come online, those tariffs seem to be going higher. So as people look for ways to kind of save money in their business, foreign trade zone may very well be a likely solution. With that, there's that tariff treatment that I talk about. Really three simple ones to look at different business models that exist out there. The first one is companies that may be bringing in products from overseas for a, let's call it, domestic distribution model. In that instance, they bring the goods in from overseas, they bring them into a foreign trade zone, and in that instance, they're allowed to postpone or defer that tariff until it's actually shipped out to the end user or customer. Very helpful to keep working capital in your pocket. Obviously, the longer your products or goods have a shelf life in your warehouse, the more value that may be to you. The second one may be an instance, we talked a lot about Canada and Mexico this morning. You may be bringing goods in over from China, right? They come into your warehouse here, but your distribution model may be such that it's going back out to Canada, Mexico, or somewhere else. That's a really good situation. It's in that situation that you have what's called a re-export, and you are completely eliminating the tariff. It's like those goods never even came to the United States. Therefore, you're not, again, paying the duties that are due on them. The third one, very applicable to your organization here, Long Island Ignite, which would be that inverted tariff relief. And I think Tom alluded to it briefly in his presentation, but this is a great opportunity for manufacturers in that if they're doing some type of assembly or manufacturing, they're able to look at, let's call it, components or ingredients versus finished product, right? And you're able to kind of look at those two things side by side. And what I mean by that is, let's say I'm making automobiles. I have a harmonized tariff code duty schedule for finished automobile, but I've got all those parts that go into the automobile. Let's call it a windshield. Windshield has its own respective tariff, right? If I bring that part in separately, I pay a separate duty for it. But because I'm making a finished product, I'm able to look at the two side by side, and at the end of the day, apply the lower tariff to that situation. So what I'm talking about is, let's say for any reason, glass is very competitive and windshields are running at a 12% tariff. But automobiles at the time are not so competitive, and they're running, let's call it, at a 0% tariff. Well, because all of my windshields are going into that finished product, the automobile, I'm able to now take that 12% down to 0 because it's again, utilizing that inverted tariff, and it's going into the finished product, and the finished product tariff is prevailing in that instance. So for manufacturers, great opportunity to really kind of look at their process, look at what's going into that assembly, and see if there's some meat on the bone for some potential savings for them. The last one I wanted to talk about was the opportunity to consolidate your merchandise processing fees. Tom had talked about containers going from, I think he said, $2,400 to $15,000. Well, on top of that, there's also a fee imposed by customs called the merchandise processing fee. Every time a customer or importer brings a container into port, they pay this fee based on the value of goods in the container. Now, it does cap out at around $500. I believe it's $485, but every time a user brings a container in, they pay this merchandise processing fee. If you're doing business across the street from me, outside of a trade zone, you're paying per container. Every time a container comes in, you pay that fee. And again, it is dependent on the value of goods. I believe it caps out at about $220,000, where you'd hit that high mark on the MPF. So let's use that example of $485. If you're bringing goods into a foreign trade zone, now because Customs knows where it's going, the process is somewhat simplified, there's an opportunity to inspect after the fact or once it's on site, you're able to now consolidate these merchandise processing filing fees into one record for a week. So this works very well for companies that might be bringing in significant shipment volume. If you're bringing in multiple containers a week, let's call it 20, you're paying outside of a trade zone, 20 times, let's call it 500, $10,000. If you're doing business in a foreign trade zone, you're only paying one turn or one time on that. You can take that $10,000 fee that you paid outside of a foreign trade zone to inside a trade zone, and you're saving about $9,500 a week times 52. That's one of the components of savings. Above and beyond savings, there's also, I believe, an efficiency to doing business out of a trade zone. As I just mentioned, CBP always reserves the right to come in and inspect after the fact. As a result, in my opinion, goods move through port much quicker. They're cleared, they're pre-screened, the officers know what's in the containers, and many times they come through much quicker. In this day and age with supply chain slowdowns, again, another great opportunity. So with that, I think if there's any importers or exporters out there that are listening to this call, I'd encourage you to either call our office, call Lisa at Suffolk County. Of course, Tom can give you kind of a better than anybody, whet your appetite on whether or not this foreign trade zone thing makes sense for you. So that's all I've got for now. I really wanted to kind of just run through it quick. I know we're kind of limited on time, and I know that's why you saved the, I guess the shortest for last.
I saved the best for last.
So not fast, shortest.
Brad,
But,
if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, what's your contact info?
Best bet is call me right at the Town of Islip Foreign Trade Zone Authority, which of course we have a website. But if you want the phone number, it's 631-588-5757. And if you don't remember that number, call any of my panelists. I believe they have my number.
Absolutely. Well, again, with all things, Brad, thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for your partnership. And we certainly look forward to having you at all of our events in the future. I think what you do for Long Island's small businesses, for our manufacturers, in the cost savings and the efficiencies that you bring to operations is critical, especially, like you said, during these troubling times. Every little bit helps. So that's tremendous. Thanks again for what you're doing. Well, with that, Brad is the caboose on this presentation. I just wanted to plug a couple things that Ignite is doing. Of course, we have our apprenticeship program right now. The hot topic, other than supply chain, across business, is a workforce. Everyone's having a difficult time in finding those employees that bring the critical skills in building our talent pipelines. We found a solution through New York State Department of Labor and through SUNY in their registered apprenticeship program. We have now, I'm working with Mike Tedisco, who's really a phenomenal partner, and I believe he's on this call right now. Mike has been building out various different programs for our 11 different sectors of manufacturing. That is really a wonderful solution to this challenging issue. If you need to get in touch with Mike, please contact me. I also want to talk about next week, we have our Opportunities in Cannabis event. Cannabis was just passed here in New York State. Recreational cannabis is legal. There is now a pun intended budding industry that didn't exist here before, all the way from the growers to the through the whole supply chain of products that are needed to get these products to market, and then of course marketing these products. So there's a ton of opportunity. I wanted to talk about them as the Manufacturing Trade Association. Link for that will be in a follow-up email that I'm going to be sending to everyone here with all the presentations and the video that we're recording right now. Finally, we have our golf outing on July 26th at Nissaquag. We still have a couple foursomes left. We still have a couple sponsorship opportunities left. If you want to get out and finally start interacting with people, I think that the Ignite LI golf outing is the way to do it. Please give me a shout. Again, I'll include all the registration links. Just wanted to, again, thank our board members for their support and their leadership. Ann Shabanko Moore, Anthony Acampora, Emma Lee, Phil Caniglio, Jordan Finkelstein, Mitchell Reckler, Michael D'Addario, and of course, our newest board member, Dr. Hank Foley, president of NYIT. And wanted to thank all of our sponsors and thank you for being here this morning. I know this was early, but I think that we wrapped it up pretty quickly. Finally, just thank you all of our participants for joining us this morning. I think if there are any follow-up questions, I'll send them your way. But with that, oh, you know what I do? Let me just see here. I do have, that's it. Okay, cool. So just again, thank you everyone. We'll call it, we'll wrap it up here, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.